loud enough, I can get through it. All right, great. Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Spring Emeriti Lecture, and this will be given by John Brown Childs, who's a distinguished Emeritus Professor of Sociology at UC Santa Cruz. This lecture series happens twice a year. It's a collaboration between the Emeriti Association and the Chancellor's Office. The function of these lectures is to highlight Emeriti activities because many of the Emeriti continue to make contributions in research, teaching, service, philanthropy. And in fact, the service, teaching, research that Emeriti do throughout the UC system amounts to a full 11th campus of the University of California. So John Childs is a volunteer teacher of peacemaking and transcommunal cooperation at the Soledad Correctional Training Facility. In 2022, he was awarded the University of California's highest honor for Emeriti faculty, which is the Constantine Panunzio Distinguished Emeriti Award. So the title of tonight's lecture is Peace Teachers in and from Soledad Prison. After the talk, there will be time for questions. I'd like to thank Chancellor Larive for supporting this series, and tonight's event will be recorded and made available on the Emeriti Association's YouTube channel after the event. Now I would like to invite Professor Flora Liu, who is Provost of College 9 in the John R. Lewis College. She's a professor of environmental studies at UC Santa Cruz, and she will give a proper introduction to our speaker.
Good evening. Thank you, Eli. I am so honored to have the privilege and pleasure of introducing my dear friend and my esteemed colleague, John Brown Childs. So John retired 14 years ago, and my goodness, he has not skipped a beat. His efforts to really bridge the academic and the advocacy work have proliferated and flourished during this time and has gained incredible renown and recognition. So let me just give you a couple examples. In 2019, Professor Childs was awarded the Division of Social Sciences Distinguished Emeriti Faculty Award, presented to him by Chancellor Larive. In 2020-2021, he was awarded the Edward A. Dixon Professorship Award, which recognizes public service, research, teaching, and creative work by Emeriti faculty. And then, of course, the 2022 Constantine Panunzio Distinguished Emeriti Award. He is only the 9th recipient of this award from UC Santa Cruz in the award's 40-year history. John's work, which bridges scholarship and social change, reflects his lifelong commitment to creating beloved community. John's social justice work goes back to his early days in the civil rights movement, from his organizing a group from the University of Massachusetts to attend the March on Washington in 1963, to his involvement with Friends of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This involvement with SNCC led him to Montgomery, Alabama, soon after the brutality inflicted at the Edmund Pettus Bridge on peaceful protesters demanding voting rights. One of the nonviolent protesters that day, known as Bloody Sunday, who almost lost their life, of course, was John R. Lewis, the civil rights icon and congressman representing the 5th District of Georgia. So now, fast forward 6 decades, John Childs played a pivotal role in the naming of John R. Lewis College here at UC Santa Cruz. This is a historic achievement for our campus and for the University of California. Because of his extended national network, including religious leaders in Atlanta and a former United Nations ambassador, John facilitated key connections and conversations that made the naming endowment of College 10 to John R. Lewis College possible. I remember on October 27th, 2021, during a live bi-coastal broadcast to announce that College 10 would be named after the late Representative John Lewis. Our own John Childs shared powerful words during that ceremony in which he channeled the life and legacy of Congressman Lewis. John called on us to lead from compassion, from love, and from dignity. This is a message that is deeply tied to his own work as a scholar. John is not only known for his groundbreaking founding and development of the concept of transcommunality, but his efforts are propelling the application of transcommunal teachings to transform lives. And I say that without exaggeration. I've seen it. We will hear more about these efforts tonight. For the past few years, I've had the privilege of working closely with John, with Barrios Unidos Executive Director, Nane Alejandres, and physics professor, Bruce Hume, who's here tonight. We have brought to fruition a new course at John R. Lewis College that innovates campus community partnerships and experiential learning for our undergraduates based on John Childs' inspiring scholarship. In winter of 2019, and again this quarter, we are bringing UCSC students to learn with and from men at Soledad Correctional Training Facility. Men who have dedicated themselves to transcommunality and becoming peace warriors and peace teachers. I can say to you that the class sessions at Soledad that I participated in are the most unforgettable and impactful educational spaces I've ever been in. The men at Soledad have deep reverence for John. I have been in meetings and class sessions with them in which they share that John is the role model that they've needed and the father figure that they've never had. John Childs is someone who never operates from a deficit-based or damage-centered framework in his dynamics with people who are currently or formerly incarcerated. Instead, his scholarship, advocacy, and volunteer work are based on the principles of building solidarity and finding liberation for ourselves through the efforts for others. Transcommunality is situated within the historical struggles and cultural knowledges of diverse peoples. It is in the redemption and the reaffirmation of all of our humanity that John's academic work finds its highest articulation. I simply cannot think of another colleague who exhibits the same dedication and passion towards enacting their scholarship, towards healing the wounds and divides in our society. I am proud to announce that John R. Lewis College is working to establish a program endowment that will support transcommunal education at UC Santa Cruz, and I welcome you to connect with me after the event if you'd like to learn more. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Distinguished Professor Emeritus John Brown Childs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome. It's great to see you all. Glad you're here. I'd like to give a moment of shout out to Professor Craig Haney, whose work over many, many decades in the interest of human rights and social justice in the prison systems of this country is outstanding and is of great importance. And we are fellow travelers on that path. So thank you, Craig. These are hard times of hatred, violence, and callousness about life. We see violence against synagogues, churches, mosques, and Sikh temples, violence against people shopping for food in Buffalo, violence against people enjoying themselves in an El Paso mall, violence against workers in a beauty salon in Atlanta, violence against women, violence against community, violence within communities. We see a toxic disregard for human life and the environment in disasters such as the train explosion in Ohio. As Marvin Gaye sang, "Brother, brother, brother, there's too many of you dying." Stan Rushworth, the Native American author and Santa Cruz resident, says, "The earth is crying." Now more than ever, we need to heed the question raised by Martin Luther King, who asked, quote, "Where do we go from here, chaos or community?" I will speak this evening about a major response to King's question, entailing a broad, encompassing sense of community within which there is a respect for diverse perspectives and points of origin, while also emphasizing cooperation and mutual understanding. This approach has been developed by an extraordinary group of men in Soledad Correctional Training Facility who are engaged in what Flora is just talking about, transcommunal cooperation, bringing men from different backgrounds, religious beliefs, ethnicities, regions, ideologies, places of origin. This compassionate development is based on, in part, on classes about what I call transcommunal cooperation and peacemaking that I began teaching in CTF, Correctional Training Facility, about 18 years ago. Importantly, today, the men who were the original students in those classes are now the teachers. Thank you, It is these men and all their students with whom I, Flora Lou, I was going to Nani and Flora Lou, so excuse me, Flora, I got the N and the L kind of compressed there. Flora Lou and Nani Alejandras, another wonderful community activist who is just outstanding, and without whom I could not be doing the work in Soledad that I do. Professor Bruce Schum, who has been with us for many, many of these classes. Thanks, Bruce, for all the work that you are doing with us. And many others who are working together. This is a story about we, not just me. It is the story of the currents leading to these transcommunal developments that I want to share with you tonight. I was born in 1942 in the Bataan Court housing project in the Roxbury section of Boston. Just had my 80th birthday on December 2nd. Thank you, I mean, I'm still, yeah, really, thank you. Still chugging along. Malcolm X, before he became Malcolm X, he was still Malcolm Little, a young teenager, lived about 2 blocks from where I lived in that project, but he was a teenager, I was a baby, so I didn't know him. That location, Roxbury, is about 30 miles north of a range of hills called the Blue Hills. The Blue Hills are an area where my mother's Native American ancestors are from. I am today an enrolled member of the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. Massachusetts in our language, the Algonquian language, Algonquian language means big hill place. Massa means big. Chusak means hill place, so we are the people of the big hill place. Ponkapog means sweet water pond, not brackish or salty, because it's right near the coast. I mention this because I want to honor my ancestors on both my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family, but also because I realized finally, about 20 or more years ago, that I've been following in the pathways of my ancestors before I even knew I was following in the pathway of my ancestors. My mother's ancestors, the Massachusetts people, got chewed up pretty badly by the usual stuff. Disease, theft of land, cultural disruption in the early 1600s. Many of them, 100 years after that, became refugees from what's now called New England. Excuse me. A whole group of Native American people from southern New England went to what's now upstate New York, where they were given access to land by the Oneida people, who are part of the great Iroquois Haudenosaunee, the Great League of Peace, about which I will say more in a few minutes. There, they established a community called, in English it's called Brothertown. In the Massachusetts language it's called Eowatchikanuk, which means the place of equal people. And it was there that they reestablished their own farms because the Massachusetts people had been agriculturalists, growing the Three Sisters, maize, beans, and squash, as well as other plants. We were fishing people right on the coast. But in Brothertown, it was a place of freedom, a place where people could be creative, a place where they did not have to bow down to colonial authority. And that lasted for a while, until the Oneida and the Haudenosaunee themselves came under pressure. My father's family is from, kind of a more contemporary sense of going back to the 1700s, are from Marion, Alabama. The Childeses were one of 6 black families in Alabama after the Civil War. By the way, my relatives down there call it the war. When I went down to visit them, they said, well, we want to talk to you about the war. And I said, what, World War II? World War? No, the war. That was the end of slavery. They were among 6 black families who helped to create the first school for African-American teachers. So it was like a teaching school, a teacher's college in the South, in what was essentially, after the end of Reconstruction, Ku Klux Klan country. It was called Lincoln Normal School, and named after Abraham Lincoln, of course. And that might not sound like much, but down there in Klan country in the 1870s, that was a big deal. It took a lot of courage to do that. I was named after my father, who was named John Brown Childs. He was named after John Brown, the abolitionist, who was hanged, of course, by the federal government for his struggles against slavery. Those 2 places, Brothertown and Lincoln Normal School, were essentially the same insofar as people tried to create these spaces of freedom and creativity. And it's in that sense that I've been trying to follow in their pathways. Again, even before I knew I was following their pathways. As Flora mentioned, I did some work in the civil rights movement, helped to create a chapter of Students for Democratic Society at UMass Amherst in the 1960s. And these were all efforts on my part to contribute to this kind of space of freedom, creativity, and justice. I have been deeply influenced as well by a Native American philosophy of peace and cooperation that was created in part by a man named Deganawida, also known as the Peacemaker, who in the we're not sure the exact date. This is an oral history to start with, so we don't know the exact dates, but probably late 1300s, early 1400s, before the arrival of the European colonist. He helped to create a peace among 5 nations that had been at bitter war with one another. These nations were the Mohawks in what's now eastern New York, near what's now Albany, the Oneida, the people who gave the use of the land to my native ancestors from New England, excuse me, the Onondaga at the center, who are near what's now Syracuse, New York, the Cayuga, and the Seneca in what's now on Lake Erie, near what's now Buffalo, New York. They were engaged in a nonstop war. It involved a lot of violence, bitterness, retribution for retribution. Blood in, blood out. It seemed unstoppable, and no one could even picture how to stop it. A man appeared named Deganawida with a message of peace. He had come down from the north across Lake Erie. The first thing Deganawida, the peacemaker, did when he arrived in that area, he went to the house of a woman named Jingasase, the woman who sits by the warpath. And she was a neutral who had provided food for the warriors as they passed between east and west, west and east to kill each other. So he knew he had to talk with her first because she really knew what was going on. So he knocked on her door and she opens it. She gives him food to eat because everyone starts. If we were doing it that way, we'd have to be eating first and then start talking. After he's finished, she asked, "What message do you bring?" And he said, "I bring the message of the mind of the Creator, that all people shall live together in peace, that thinking will replace killing," which is a very significant sentence. Not nonviolent, but thinking, rational thought shall replace killing, and all people shall love one another. And her response was really beautiful, very practical. She said, "Your words are good, but what form will your words take when they come to work in the world?" So great idea, great vision, great dream. How are you going to do it? The peacemaker had a response to that, which was not the actual doing of it, but he had a plan laid out. The Haudenosaunee, which means people of the longhouse basically, are people who lived in longhouses, which were structures with family compartments. Each family was autonomous, independent, had its own identity, but in any given longhouse, they all had to work together if there was a longhouse issue, like a hole in the roof. Everyone had to get together to work on that. The peacemaker said to Jingasase, "We shall be like the longhouse. The Mohawks in the east shall be the keepers of the eastern door. The Senecas in the west shall be the keepers of the western door. The Onondaga in the center will keep the central fire of the longhouse. The Oneidas and the Cayugas will be in the other compartments of the longhouse. One structure, many people. One structure, pluralism, diversity, but coordinated." It was a brilliant metaphor for that time because it really did use some people lived in longhouses, so it was very concrete in its imagery. But of course, then there was the problem of bringing that message to the warring nations. And he and his assistant Hiawatha, not the Hiawatha of Longfellow, by the way, he took that name and somehow, transposed it to areas that had nothing to do with this story at all. And Jingasase were able to go from nation to nation, east to west, west to east, to convince them of the significance of peace in using the longhouse metaphor. But there was one person and one group that people said, "Don't go there," and that was the Onondaga and their leader, Tadadaho. And Tadadaho, the name basically roughly means the man with the rattlesnakes in his hair. He was a very dangerous guy. He could kill you from a distance. And people said, "Forget about peace with Tadadaho. It's not possible." But the peacemaker said, "But he is exactly the person we must go to. Because if we do not go to him, we shall have no peace." So the peacemaker goes. It takes a long time for them to get there. Tadadaho creates all sorts of problems. But finally they do go. And in the words of the story, by the way, this story goes on for hours and hours and hours. So I'm giving you a very, very compressed, short version. But in the words of the story, they combed the rattlesnakes from his hair. And his thinking was made clear. He became a warrior for peace. Still a warrior, still strong, but a warrior for peace rather than for killing. And that story, which has a lot of very detailed protocols in it of how to bring about that longhouse, take it from just being a metaphor to being a reality. And it's the elements of those protocols that have directly influenced what I call transcommunality, transcommunal cooperation and peacemaking. And here are some of the elements. One is what I call is constructive disputing, the ability to be able to disagree and still work together. And it's hard enough to reach agreement when you have different perspectives, different religions, different ideologies, different viewpoints, different points of origin, et cetera, et cetera. It's even harder to disagree and still work together. My wife, Dell, and I have been married since 1977. That's a long time, long enough to have a lot of arguments and disagreements. She helped me to become a better man than I had been. But we have learned about each other through both the agreement and the disagreement. And there are some things she likes that I don't, and vice versa. But that's who we are. I don't try to convert her into being me, and she doesn't try to do the same to me. We try to work with each other as we are. But in the process, we also have changed. I've changed. I've hopefully grown a bit, learned a bit more about living with Dell, and Dell's learned about living with me. We become somewhat different people than we had been, but without forcing a view on each other. It's that sense of being able to reach that kind of disagreement and learn from it that is at the heart of the Longhouse protocols. So what you see in those protocols is also what I would call coordinated autonomy. It's not the melting pot, right? It's not, let's obliterate difference because difference is bad, it creates problems. We need to all be together as one. But like the Longhouse was one, but it was also many. And the many were also one. As Simone Weil pointed out, in the dark days of Nazi occupation of Europe, to be rooted is one of the essential features of the human soul. So to have roots, to feel distinctive identity, or I would say, prefer to say distinctive affiliation that is deep, is part of the human condition. And it's really a matter not of that being a problem, but rather how do we coordinate those many different roots into one form that also is also many forms. So out of, as the motto of the United States says, out of many come one, but also for the Haudenosaunee, it was also out of one come many. Right? How does one do that, though? To go back to Jingasase's words. What I've found over the years is that the other aspect that's so crucial in the Longhouse imagery is shared practical activism or action. The more we work together, the more we can learn about each other. So it's not a matter of just abstract kind of, let's get together and have a good time, or let's get together. We learn a lot by doing things together. Some years ago, I was invited to give a talk at Temple Bethel, and it was a moment, it was a long time ago now, there was some conflict in Brooklyn between the Orthodox community and the black community. And so there was a lot going on in the news about that, and Temple Bethel quite wonderfully set up a panel on black, African-American, Jewish-American interactions and relations. And when it came my time to speak, I was thinking about it, and I thought, one thing that we could do that wouldn't address that issue directly, I mean, in other words, not try to reach that solution to that issue through talk, but suppose we all did something together, like say NAACP, Black Baptist churches, Temple Bethel, working together in support of farm workers in the Salinas Valley. That kind of work is a good thing to do, but it also helps to teach us about one another because we're working together. And that works at many different levels. Anyone who's tried to organize a meeting knows that there's a lot of things that have to be done, and you learn about people, whether if they do those things right or they don't do them right. Someone has to set up the chairs, right? And maybe they screw it up and they don't set up the chairs. Right? They say, I thought you were more thoughtful than that. Well, then you find out about that person. That person then finds out, hey, maybe I should do it a little differently. Shared practical action is the glue that helps to make this out of one come many and many come one possible. The Haudenosaunee also said that their leaders had to have skin that was 7 thumbs thick. So you didn't fly off the handle just because someone said something nasty or unpleasant. You had to be able to absorb it and listen. And listening is the other key aspect of the protocols. There was both the speaking, which was necessary, but also the listening. And there's a wonderful ceremony, which again, I couldn't possibly do it. I'm not allowed to do it as a ceremony, quite rightly. I'm not holding a shoni. But it's also a very long ceremony, but it's called the Wood's Edge, and also the condolence ceremony. And let me just give you a few aspects of it, because it really speaks to this idea of listening and being aware of others. And it goes something like this: welcome to all of you here tonight. We know you have come a long way to be here. That perhaps you have gone through troubles. Perhaps you've had losses. Perhaps you are in pain. So now we wipe the tears from your eyes so that you may see the sun. Now we clear the noise of sorrow from your ears so that you may hear the wind. Now we open up your throat so that you can breathe and speak. It's a wonderful ceremony that speaks to the physiology almost of compassion and being able to cooperate. I mean, you know that saying, I'm all choked up? That's what that's partly about. It's releasing that terrible, blockage of the throat that one gets when one's really upset and angry or fearful. The elements of the Ganaweda's protocols are what I have drawn on now for the creation of the transcommunal approach. There are many other elements in it, but it is that kind of coming together that has been so amazing to see in Soledad prison. I started teaching these classes back on transcommunality in the prison. I say in the prison system because we started actually not in Soledad, but in Tracy, a prison called DVI, Dual Vocational Institution. It actually had been vocational in a sense. They used, way back, they had airplane mechanics training programs. They had half of a passenger jet in the prison compound area where men learned how to work on planes. I mean, that was in the 50s, really. There was carpentry, plumbing. I mean, it actually was it came out of a different kind of era. There were still horrible things that happened, but there was that sense of transformation possibilities. But I went there with Nani Alejandros and Barish Unidos. My first time to go into a prison that way. I'd gone to visit people I knew in prison way, way back in another day. But this was not a family visit or a friend visit. We met with two groups at DVI. One was the Mexican American Cultural Committee, and the other was the African American Historical Committee of incarcerated men. Now, just the fact that the African American Cultural Committee and the Mexican American Cultural Committee were there together, they were working on a Cinco de Mayo celebration at DVI. The fact that they were together was an amazing development because the internal dynamics of so many prison institutions is one of group, if not conflict, and certainly of territorial zones that one cannot cross. Group X is here, Group Y is there, never to work together. And to work together means maybe going against codes and norms coming from maybe the institution itself and coming from other incarcerated men. So this was an amazing development. And in fact, it was very transcommunal. They had never heard the word. They didn't need to read a book about it. They were doing it. But when I was talking about transcommunality with them, it began to, as they told me, said, oh, it's nice to know we're doing something that has a kind of a framework to it, a set of resources we can draw on. And then the leader of the Mexican American Cultural Committee said, his name was Ernie Barrera, wonderful man. He died in prison from pneumonia. He was a great person. He said, "Why don't you teach a class on this?" And I said, "Wow, I never thought of doing that." So the idea for all this came from Ernie Barrera and the men inside. And so I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And Ani looked at me and said, "You sure you want to, can you do this?" I said, "Well, I can certainly try. I can try." I wasn't sure how to do it. I had never taught a class in a prison before. But so we set it up, and then we started teaching, not talking about it, let's say, transcommunality, with the full recognition that men there had already been doing it. So it was a question of how do we weave this kind of already existing way of being into this concept in a way that the concept is helpful to the way of doing itself. Later, we moved to Soledad Correctional Training Facility, and for the past 18 years, I've been teaching classes there. Or I should say I started out teaching classes there because the men inside became the teachers who had started there. So now we're working, Flora Lou, Nani Alejandras, Bruce, Hume, and I, and many others, on coordinating with the group inside that is now the organizing committee for this. The name of that group is Samanawak, which is a Nahuatl Mexican indigenous name meaning one world. So it's the Samanawak/One World Cultural Group. It's Black, brown, Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, white, people who had been white supremacists, people who, Black Baptist, Buddhist, people of different ideologies, people from northern Serranos, Norteños, Northern California, Southern California, people who shouldn't be together but are. They shouldn't be together, they're told, but they are. It takes a lot of courage to do that, but they are absolutely convinced of the significance of working together. So One World really captures the essence of what they do. They are creators of a term that will sound familiar now from Tadadaho, called Peace Warriors. The men who take these classes, the transcommunality classes, and who also take classes in nonviolence as enunciated by Martin Luther King, taught by an amazing man named Kazu Haga, who was one of the organizers of the East Point Peace Academy in Oakland. He started classes that helped to certify men in nonviolence training so that they could train others. So the Peace Warriors are men who have taken the nonviolence courses, have taken the transcommunality courses, and at the end of the transcommunality course, everyone in it signs a Peace Warrior pledge of nonviolence as well as community enhancement, of doing good in their communities to the degree that it's possible. Every now and then I say to the guys inside, you know, it's really amazing. Here we are in Soledad Correctional Training Facility. And about 600 years ago, the words that we are talking about, the peacemaker, the ideas that go into transcommunality were enunciated in what's now upstate New York by a Native American philosopher. Those words still live, those ideas still live, and they're very alive inside Soledad. Many of the men who have taken these courses some of them are out now on parole or discharged from parole, but inside and outside the institution, they are doing well and doing good. The recidivism rate is 0 for everyone who has been associated with this. Now, I say that not to say that somehow that's because they read transcommunality or it's that's in the picture. It's their own will, their own self-determination, their own discipline, their own thirst for knowledge, their thirst for freedom, and to help others not to fall into the traps that they fell into when they were young. that drive, that thirst is what makes them succeed when they get out into the world. And for those who are not out, they also are succeeding. We just were, Flora and I and Sam Cunningham, who had been incarcerated in Soledad, and Nani Alejandros were just meeting with the warden at Soledad CTF on Monday. The warden, by the way, is a young man. He looks young to me. I mean, but he's very dynamic, very progressive. His name is Luis Martinez. And he's a very positive person. He's working really hard with a young, good staff to develop ways of being inside correctional training facility that will humanize it to the degree possible in the prison system in a way that might help more men to be able to get out, get parole, get discharged from parole. So I give a lot of credit to the warden. And by the way, ultimately, I think we're all for the abolition of prisons. I mean, they're horrible places. But I think that while they're here, working with a warden like that is essential. Otherwise, we couldn't get in. Right? So we have to be able to get in. And when you can have a partnership of a kind with the administration, it makes a huge difference. That also is transcommunal. Right? It's crossing a line. I mean, how many movies have I seen? Shawshank Redemption, Escape from Alcatraz. Where these sadistic wardens, and some may be, but many years ago, I saw a Zen poem, short, that went like this: I thought I saw a red-bearded man, then I realized it was a man with a red beard. I transposed that. I was thinking about it. It took me a little while. I transposed that to, I thought I saw a slave, then I realized it was a man held in slavery. And it's that view that helps us and helps the men inside to work with the warden, work with each other, work with people from outside without, because we're looking for what's going on in the soul, in the heart, not assuming anything about someone because of the clothes they wear, the tattoos they have, the hair kind of they have, but what's going on the inside. Now, to do that requires being able to work with people with respect. And that's the other key term that comes out of the set of transcommunal protocols that I draw from Degana Weeder. Respectful listening, respectful speaking, respectful learning are absolutely essential. Unfortunately, we're living in a moment in this society in which mutual respect is kind of hard to come by. But I do see it going on there. I mean, as Flores pointed out, the positive energy, the constructive, creative energy of the men with whom we work is astonishing. I mean, in a way, I'm not surprised because they're really great, but they have a lot that they can offer to the world. They are, therefore, I think, potentially, and now are moral, ethical, political guides for a lot of people, both inside the system and outside it. Let me just read a couple of examples of some of the thoughts of the men inside. Brother Van Jones, who's a young black man, he's now out and is doing great work down in Riverside with his partner, Deanne, where they've started an organization called Locked In that works on social justice issues. They work with the Riverside County school systems. They work with the Riverside Sheriff's Department. And again, transcommunal, if it's possible, they'll do it. But this is Van speaking when he was inside Soledad. He says, when my mother was in the hospital and I thought she was not going to make it, I shared my fear and pain with my close friend, a proud Hispanic to whom I turned when I needed advice and guidance or someone just to hear me. I went to one of my mentors, Jaime, a retired police lieutenant with 30 years of law enforcement experience. I believe in love and peace and coming together. I urged a friend of mine who had been a white supremacist to take a nonviolence workshop based on the teachings of Martin Luther King. That's Van. That's that wonderful spirit of peace, but also of respect, and also of the Tadadaho principle, which is that the worst of the worst has good in him or her. And that just as Tadadaho became a peace warrior and went from being a man of violence to a man of peace, this is the essence of what Van is talking about. Another brother there named Amos, Brother Amos, says, "To me, we have to live brave to be free. Mother Ella Baker, I feel your guiding spirit leading me to write the next chapter of human rights in U.S. history. To continue the movement that you began till Black Lives Matter is not just a saying, but a way of life across the land. Brother John Lewis, you gone, but I feel you so near. Get in some good trouble, so if we double the trouble, and even if in that protesting they accuse us of causing a rumble, with peace in our hearts and from a place of love and faith in God from above, let freedom ring." Love is a very interesting word. I hear it a lot in Soledad. I love you, brother. I love you, sister. I appreciate you. These are not words, I mean, with all due respect for academia, these are not words that one hears easily flowing in classrooms or meetings. But it's a commonplace in Soledad. There's a wonderful embracing aspect which is so essential to the work of transcommunal cooperation. Such compassion is infused with both the spirit of the Ganawitas, quote, "thinking will replace killing," and Martin Luther King's assertion, "hate is too heavy a burden to bear, I choose love." In 2018, I received another educational suggestion from inside the prison system. I mean, they've been helping me to figure out what contributions I can make. This suggestion was from Enrique Rivera, a member of the Samanawak Executive Committee. Enrique suggested a combined class of UCSC and CTF students. I said, wow, that's an interesting idea. I said, I don't know, I mean, I was thinking about all the possible institutional barriers. You know, I said, God, I didn't do it. I said, I don't know, Enrique. I'll see what I can find out. He said, no, I'm sure you can do it, he said. I'm sure you can do it. He was right. But it wasn't just me, of course. I mean, I could do it, but only because of Flora, Bruce, and also University Extension, to which we now have a great partnership. And through University Extension, for the first time, we're going to be able to offer UCSC course credit to the men inside who are taking these combined classes. Yeah. And Flora played a major role in working with University Extension on that development. We were also greatly helped by a CTF staff member, civilian staff member named Roberta Schweers. Roberta's been there for a long time. I don't know if any of you were in the military or not, but she's like the master sergeant who knows everything that's going on, how it really works, you know, not what the officers say. And she is the co-sponsor, the sponsor of the class inside. The prison requires that there be someone from inside the institution to sponsor in a class. So Roberta does that. She works a full workday, and then in the evening, when we go in on Thursday nights, 6 times during the quarter, she is there to sponsor the class. So she also has been just pivotal to what we're doing. I mention all that because it's that kind of cooperation with the warden, with Roberta, with Flora, with Bruce, with Nane and Baruch Unidos, and with Samanawak that makes it all come together. There's no I, again, it is a we. I contribute my own little slice. You know, my basic feeling in life is everyone knows something, no one knows everything, right? And so it's with that in mind, we can all kind of try to pull what we do know together, which makes for a larger pool of knowledge. Now that COVID restrictions have been lifted at CTF and at the university, we're able to continue doing this class. We'll do the first one inside the prison on next Thursday. Not this coming Thursday, but Thursday of next week. All this teaching, learning, and organizing of transcommunal work and Kingian nonviolence is crucial, I believe, in today's society, this riddled with violence, hatred, misunderstanding, and distrust and discord. You know that saying, no justice, no peace. But I think there's a kind of a peace that has to precede that saying. There has to be a peace that stops young black men and young brown men from killing each other in our communities. A peace that reduces and ends the violence and negative divisions within and among communities in order for that pro-democracy work to proceed with vigor and sustainability. The peace warriors in Samanawak and all who have taken the classes are in a position to greatly assist such pro-democracy development, be it inside the prison system or outside it. These teachers of peace, these peace warriors, both in CTF and from it, are crucial activist guides for moving away from violence and hatred toward a transcommunal longhouse society in the United States that is fused with mutual respect and cooperation among all of our diverse peoples. I want to conclude this talk tonight, not with my words, but with the words of some of the men in the Samanawak group. It's from a documentary they put together a few years ago. So I want to end with their words. Can we put that on, please? Let me get on.
I stand here to inform you about some awesome stuff. Semanawak is a word in the Nahuatl language that means one world. The Semanawak cultural group is grounded in two philosophies. They are transcommunality and Kingian nonviolence. Our mission is to promote peace, mutual respect, multiculturalism, and social justice. Our immediate goal is to establish a circle of peace warriors. Our long-term goal is to institute constructive interconnectedness between people of all walks of life. We believe we can accomplish this by working toward the fulfillment of Dr. King's beloved community, emulating the Iroquois' longhouse, and employing the transcommunal method.
Peace warriors believe in equality, dignity, and diversity. Peace warriors believe that humanity possesses the ability to achieve a positive state of peace. Peace warriors stand with those who do not know how to stand for themselves. We stand with those who do not know how to stand for themselves, and we stand with those who strive for social justice.
Being a peace warrior to me is being an activist. Being actively committed to the betterment of my community through commitment to nonviolent conflict resolution and the development of transcommunal relationships.
Being a peace warrior means that I get to be part of a continuing historical legacy of those who believe that all human beings are equally human and should be treated as such, and who believe that the solutions to the problems of the insanity of hate is grounded in the sanity of peace, love, and nonviolence.
Being a peace warrior is a journey that I began in Semanawak and that I'll continue to live for the rest of my life. It is seeking peaceful solutions within our community so we can live in peace and harmony.
Being a peace warrior to me means that I will no longer work towards wrong, evil, violence, and hate, but rather that I will fight for good, for right, for love, and for peace.
Transcommunality means everything to me. It's the blueprint for living a better life. It's what helps not only me, but my co-facilitators, the participants, and members of this community become better men. It helps us stand up for what we believe in. It helps us see from other people's point of view. It helps us understand one another better. It allows us to build interpersonal relations based on trust and respect.
Transcommunality has taught me that I did not have to give up my roots or identity to coexist with others in America, but be proud of my rooted affiliation. It has also taught me to respect and appreciate other ethnic, class, religion, and gender. As a trans-communalist, I form bridges between diverse people.
Embodying the social skills approach, which helped me rediscover the humanity that we all have in us as human beings, in which we are connected through our diverse human experiences with mutual respect.
In transcommunal living, I strive to live by the 9 elements of transcommunality, authored by Dr. John Brown Childs. And the goal is basically that we work together to find solutions that will benefit all.
If violence is poisoning the world that I love, then King in Nonviolence Conflict Reconciliation is the only antidote. And living a life of nonviolence is the only way of life for courageous people.
Far too long, I have carried bitterness and resentment. In return, I have abused myself and others. However, King in Nonviolence has changed that equation by replacing hatred with hope and love. King in Nonviolence has lifted that weight of bitterness and resentment from my life.
King in Nonviolence is a mirror that reflects the truth that I need to be a far better person than I am.
In 2013, I arrived to CTF State Prison, where I encountered the man who murdered my best friend. I still harbored hatred and anger towards the man who killed my best friend. King in Nonviolence taught me what I was practicing was negative peace, which is not peace at all. Positive peace is to have reconciliation. Today, I am able to call the man who took my best friend's life my friend.
Before, all I knew was to resolve things through violence. Today, I've learned about King in Nonviolence and the principles that Martin Luther King teaches. And if I can save somebody from going through all the pain and the destruction that I've caused, then that's going to be my life goal and my life journey, to teach nonviolence to people.
Is a vision of a global community where people can hold on to their own cultural perspectives and realities and work together for the betterment of their communities.
Kenyan Nonviolence, wow. Kenyan Nonviolence is an anchor to my commitment in the movement for social justice and equality in a manner that's conducive to the betterment of society through peaceful means.
It's really simple. I do this work because I love it and I know it works. I love witnessing diverse people come together and connecting on the basis of their shared humanity, learning about each other, and forming personal relationships with one another.
We took this to heart and we began to do the work of transhumanality and King in Nonviolence. And out of that comes Peace Warriors. I believe in connecting with the community because it's important for people to see us in a different light.
I believe community is important. And for us to improve our society, we must give back.
The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. And if I want to change my world that I'm living in, I must be the change. I must change myself first and the rest will follow.
That every ailment has a cure, and that every cure is found in its opposite. For far too long, I've been a detriment to my own community. Violence and working against one another has never worked out in the end.
That the power of love is greater, far greater than hatred, than fear. But it takes courage, and it takes practice.
A person who makes a mistake can transform, can become better.
I do this work because my soul demands it. No longer am I willing to just stand by idle while injustice thrives in our society.
I must speak out, and I must act. There is no neutral zone called indifference between right and wrong and good and evil.
Why do I do this work? To enhance the existence of others so that we can all know that we can create meaning and purpose in our lives through being a service to each other and through community healing.
Thank you, John. That was quite amazing.
Thank you. Well, they're amazing.
And I believe John will take questions. Because there are quite a number of people on Zoom, we ask that you ask your questions using the microphone.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. Yeah.
Thank you so.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring, and congratulations on the marvelous work you're doing. I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Can anyone in the prison be part of the classes, or is there some kind of screening process to allow people in or not? And the second question is, do you track these people after they are out to see what they're doing and how they're surviving and whether they're carrying out these ideals that they've learned in your classes?
Right. Well, the first one is that we rely on Semanawak to do the organizing in Soledad CTF. I mean, they know what's going on there. They know everyone inside. Everyone knows them. So basically, they set up the waiting list for the class. They screen people who are coming into it, mostly on the basis of what they know about those individuals personally, because again, they understand the place and the people in it. So we rely on them to create the classes inside. We do the classes, when we do the combined class, we're bringing in UCSC students, and we have a somewhat similar kind of screening system, just to make sure people can, it's a chilling experience to go inside. Not because of the men inside, but you know, the 5 guard gates, those heavy iron doors that clang shut, and there you are in between, waiting for the next one to get buzzed open. I've never had a bad experience in any of the prison work I've done, but it is an intimidating kind of place to be in. So we try to make sure that our students are ready to be able to deal with that and not be overwhelmed by it. We look out for our students. We drive them down in vans. We share transportation. We make sure that we have 2 classes in Soledad CTF. Then we have a break class where people can talk about their reflections. We ask people to keep journals. Then we go back in, and the men inside have done the same. And by the way, here's another way in which the Samanawak has organized these classes. They suggested in 2019 that we set up transcommunal working groups in the classes. So every student from UCSC or CTF is assigned to a working group. And these working groups, side by side, shared practical action. They deal with the readings. There's a reader. We use Transcommunality, a book about the Haudenosaunee called The White Pine Tree, Roots of Peace, material on Northern Ireland, the peace process in Northern Ireland, a book about South Sudan by a wonderful Sudanese woman writer. So those are the discussion frames, and Samanawak has set that up, and they want to make sure that the men inside and the students who are coming in can really work together, and it's just been amazing. So they organize it. And what was the second? Oh, right. Yeah. Well, in a formal sense, no. I mean, we don't do a formal kind of tracking regimen. We know everyone. I mean, everyone who's gotten out, we know. And we know where everyone is and what they're doing. For example, that meeting that I mentioned with the warden, who was Flora, me, Nane, and a man named Sam Cunningham. Sam Cunningham had been incarcerated for some 30 years in Soledad prison. So there we are in the warden's office with the warden's team, and there's Sam, and we're going around, he identifies himself, and he's talking with the warden and everyone else there. I mean, it's not, he said it, he never could imagine that would be something that he would be in a position to do. And Sam works for Barrios Unidos, by the way. Craig, I won't mention his last name, but he's working with the Monterey County Board of Elections. There's another one. Another brother, Rome, is now the interim head of the Oakland East Point Peace Academy. I mean, the stories go on and on like that. But we know who everyone is, where they are. We're not tracking. So we don't track people. We don't try to keep an eye on anyone. But we try to provide support when needed, and we certainly try to encourage any positive community work that they're doing. Is that a fair enough answer? Okay, thank you. Good questions.
Thank you, John.
Hi,
that
Willow.
was beautiful.
Good to see you. Yeah, you also do amazing work with the prison system, Willow, and this is Willow Katz. And thank you.
Thank you, John. So my first question is, I was really struck that they're using a Nahuatl word for the organization, because so many people have gone to solitary confinement behind using Nahuatl or having any images of Mexican or Aztec jaguars or pyramids or anything. So that was very, very impressive. I'm wondering if there has been any retaliation against people for the use of Nahuatl or anything like that. And then my second question is, if these men, the people that you're working with, have worked at all with the Agreement to End Hostilities that was developed in 2012 by the Pelican Bay State Prison, people in the SHU, security housing units in solitary confinement, who developed this peace treaty between the black groups, the white groups, the Mexican Northerners, the Mexican Southerners, the Agreement to End Hostilities across racial, ethnic, and geographic lines.
Okay, thank you. Both questions are great. To the best of my knowledge, there has been no retaliation, negative reaction to this. One of the things that I think really helped was when we first started going in, there was a warden named Randy Grounds, very tough guy, very big, and very warden looking, right? But he had to check us out first. He came talk with Nane, talked with us. But once he was convinced that, we were trying to do positive, constructive work with people inside who were doing positive, constructive work, he fully supported us. Now, he's not the warden anymore. He left some years ago. And we've had, over the years, sometimes less cooperative wardens. And now we have a great one with whom we can work. So I would say that's part of the answer in a practical sense. But you know, there's a way in which Nane and Barrios Unidos, they bring medicine, is the way they put it, inside, spirit medicine. And it's not a matter of, I mean, it's not like Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a great organization. It's not like other organizations that are doing great work inside. There's an emphasis on the spirit, and doesn't require any particular religious angle on it. And there's something about it that really reaches men inside in a way that I think we're doing things that really turn over a lot of the standard inside structures, but we're doing it in a way that actually don't threaten the administration. And you know, there are correctional officers, some of whom are friendly to us and helpful, others might not be so enthusiastic. I've offered to teach transcommunality to the correctional officers. I haven't quite got a bite on that yet. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'd be glad to do it. I mean, that would be very transcommunal. Now, specifically, last year we did a mini class because COVID had shut down the larger operation. But we were able to get a mini class of two weeks in Soledad combined with UCSC students. And in one of those transcommunal working groups, I was talking with a man whom I hadn't met before, who had been in Pelican Bay at that time. And he said, you know, I used to just be absolutely opposed to working together with blacks, whites, people from whatever other part of California. I don't go into those details. He said, I absolutely refused to do it, but they really convinced me. And he said, and this really caught my ear, he said, I was like Tadadaho. He said, I had those rattlesnakes in my mind. And working together, that what I would call shared practical action, working together with these groups, once he was able to do it, really brought him to a different perspective. But it was that work, because the men who were doing that in Pelican Bay, really, they were transcommunal. They had nothing to do with reading my book or anything. They were doing it. But he reads the book and then says, wow, I recognize that guy, Tadadaho. I was like that. Now I'm like the Tadadaho he became, the peace warrior. So, but Pelican Bay and that moment was very, very influential. Does that help with that? Is that okay, thank you.
My question is there anything similar being done for women?
As far as I know, not yet. We're working on it.
And also the students that come from here, are they mixed?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, mixed in many, many ways. And by the way, you know, there are a lot of people in our society who are relatives in prison. You know, you might not think about it, one might not think about it that way, but I know wardens who have relatives in prison. I know police who have relatives in prison. So the students who go in are very diverse, and they're interested in social justice, legal studies, but they also, some of them have had, you know, maybe experiences seeing things happen. So they go in with a deep desire to comprehend what's going on inside. Now, women's prisons, we have not been able to get into at this point. That's a very vital, I mean, to put it mildly, that's a big chunk of the prison population. It's increasing. And we need to be able to develop this kind of work, and not just transcommunality, all the other groups that are doing work. I mean, I think women's prisons tend to be underserved in that sense. So I agree with you. Thanks for bringing that up. It's very important. And it's something that I think we're going to, you know, we're trying to work on it. We're moving in that direction. But like this took time to develop. I think that's going to take some time to develop. Is that fair enough as a response? Okay, thank you. And over here. Oh, there you go.
Okay. So the question I had is, it seems like the prison, it's a miracle it's happening in the prison, but on the other hand, it's a system where maybe it lends itself to it, and I wonder if this works outside. You know, it sounds like some of the people who have benefited it are doing that when they get out, but is that, there's a lot of really angry young men and women out there and the crime is increasing because of that, I think, because of economic and a lot of other things. And I'm wondering, without having kind of with a formal and in some cases forced sort of situation where everybody's together, if this kind of system can work.
It does in certain settings. I know that the East Point Peace Academy in Rome, who was again in the Semanawak classes and became a teacher, that they're reaching out to young people in Oakland, bringing Kingian nonviolence and transcommunality to the streets. Now, you know, how effective? I mean, it will reach someone. And, you know, even if it's just one person, it's still someone. You know, these are not huge, broad programs with thousands of workers. So, you know, it's hard to do it. And, you know, San Quentin has a lot of wonderful programs. We don't work there at the moment. Nani goes in every now and then. But there are institutions like High Desert up in Northern California that are devoid of anything like this, prison institutions. So, you know, it's not only women's prisons, but there are, I mean, a big chunk of the prison system we haven't been able to reach. And there's a limit to what we can do because you have to be able to travel, you have to be able to, you know, be there. So there's a tremendous need for it. But I think that, I mean, Sam Cunningham, again, works in Seaside and Salinas and with the school districts in those areas. And he is working with young people. I did a consultant, non-paid. By the way, all of us are volunteers. We don't get paid by the prison system. No one does. I teach these courses pro bono for the university. So we're not contract volunteers. And no offense to those who are. I mean, you know, because you know, people need to get paid to do work that's really difficult and challenging. But we have the ability to kind of do this that way. So, but Sam Cunningham reaches a whole lot of people. Sometimes, he had a very tragic event in his life of doing that work. A young man whom he had been mentoring and with whom he had been working was shot to death in Salinas 2 years ago. That's part of the horrible picture, but he's still there working, Sam is. So it's going on. Is it enough? Probably not. Does it reach some people? Probably. And I would say this also about inside Soledad. There are men who don't want to take part in these classes. I've given talks on transcriminality to groups say, hey, we don't want to hear that stuff. We're not interested. And I say, well, okay. You know, transcriminality has to be based on mutual respect and shared practical action. And if people don't want to do that, you can't make them do it. Also, there's a certain parameter that I won't cross. I will work with just about anyone. I won't work with a Nazi, for example, who wants to get rid of me because of what I look like, who I am. So transcriminality doesn't work for, you know, there's an outer limit. But I have worked with people who used to be skinheads and want to get away from that. And that is doable with this. But again, we know what people are doing. We can see what they're doing. And I'm going to Rome from Oakland is going to be here next week for an event we're doing, and I'm going to be asking him about that. You know, what's that like? And I'm going to go up to, he wants me to come up to Oakland. I'll do that. And, you know, go out and meet people out in the street and talk about transcriminality. So we'll see how that goes. Okay.
I think there was a question on Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, so John, Governor Newsom recently announced a transformation of San Quentin State Prison to San Quentin Rehabilitation Center.
Mm-hmm.
So do you anticipate participating in that transformation in some form?
Not organizationally. I mean, I think we have our plate is pretty full doing what we're doing. And San Quentin is has had amazing good fortune to be where it is in the sense of there are legal, cultural organizations that are very active in San Quentin. San Quentin, the incarcerated men, they have their own newspaper, the San Quentin News, that gets distributed throughout the prison system, for example. So that's done with the Association of, I don't remember the exact name, but an association of journalists in San Francisco. So I know about that change. I'm going to see what more develops from it. But at this point, we're really focused on Soledad, and we want to do a good job, and that means we have to be really focused.
There was a question in the back first, and then...
I'm wondering how the different faiths, Muslim, Buddhist, Protestant, Catholic, and so on, of your participants, what kind of role that played, or how did that come up and
right.
work? Because you didn't mention anything about that. And
I said
think it's
Baptist and Buddhist, but
it's also an additional
sure.
dimension of diversity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, there is the importance of respect, mutual respect for diversity, heterogeneity of culture, and respect for the fact that people are not just, I know we hear about celebrating diversity, I'm all for that, but when there's real diversity, not just cosmetic diversity, then you're going to have real differences. I mean, that comes with the territory. So there are real differences, and people transcommunally and are resolving those. But here's how I think it works in Soledad. And I also saw this many years ago in an obituary of a Hasidic rabbi in New Jersey. It was a long obituary in the Times. And he had been very active in the community. I think it was Newark. It was Newark, if I remember correctly. Someone asked him that very question. He said, how do you work with the Puerto Ricans and the blacks and these different communities, different religious traditions, etc.? He said, we don't talk about it. And you say, they have their views, I have mine. So on that one, it's like constructive disputing. In some ways, if you can't reach an agreement, better to let that one drop if you can go to other things that you can agree on. And that's basically what is happening in Soledad, and it's what that esteemed rabbi did in Newark. Okay.
So there was one question here, I think a question there, one in the back. Oh, okay.
So I just wanted to mention that Kazuhaga,
yes.
who you mentioned, and others are going to be here April 16th to 21st at the Ben Lomond Quaker Center doing the Asian Diaspora Jam. So they'll be doing some of the kind of work you're talking about in the Asian diaspora community.
Yeah, thank you very much, Willow. That's great to know. I didn't know that. Yeah, great.
In this age of distance learning, teaching of Zoom, are you using Zoom to reach incarcerated?
Well, number one, I have mixed feelings about Zoom. It's wonderful as a way of reaching over great distance. I agree. But transcommunality requires that interpersonal, shared practical action of working together. You can do some of that over Zoom, but there's no substitute for the face-to-face kind of work together. That's one aspect. The other is we can't do that because there's no real internet access. I mean, this course that gets the 2 credits, the only way we can do that is not to have the men register as, apply and register as students online, because there is no online that they have access to. So that's where University Extension has been wonderful. They take paperwork that's been submitted from CTF, and they translate that into digital inputs into their UCSC enrollment system. So without that, we couldn't do the course. So during COVID, Flora and I and several students from the original combined class did a recorded Zoom that was then, it took a while because the prison system stuff is really archaic in many ways. I mean, the fact that they put that documentary together the way they did, using like Thomas Edison kind of equipment, is really quite, it took a lot. And they weren't reading from teleprompters. I mean, this was, so even with the recorded part, I remember it took quite a while to have someone transfer it to something else. That might be changing, might be getting a little bit better under the new warden. But we don't have direct internet connection with the men inside. So that's why we have to really be there.
Thank you so much for your work and for being here today.
Thank you.
My first question is, where, if anywhere, do you feel restorative or
communal.
Yeah.
It's a hard word.
Is restorative justice
yeah.
fitting in, or transformative? I was actually thinking transformative, restorative or transformative justice, just in your mind, or if it is directly in there. And then the other question, which I think was sort of touched on, I have a lot of connections in New York, and is there a hope or possibility for this to occur there?
Well, that would be wonderful. Like Rikers, for example.
Hopefully.
I mean, that would be, that's a hard nut to crack. That's a very, very terrible picture in Rikers. I'm not sure. At the moment, I would say there's no practical possibilities that we know of. But, if I'm hoping as the word gets out more and more about this, that people who are like already doing it in some way might be able to say, well, maybe, maybe if Flora and you and Nani came to talk with us, maybe that would, so we're open to that. We haven't made that kind of leap yet. It hasn't quite worked in that sense. Now, in terms of restorative justice and just justice in general, I think that it totally overlaps. It's not a competing way of thinking. It's, I think more of it as, it enables restorative justice to be effective and worked with. We have to be able to work together first if we're going to do that. So I think this is part of the picture. It's one part of it. It's not the whole part of it. So, you don't have to do transcommunal work. You can do restorative justice work. You can do prison abolition work. It all in some ways overlaps in that wonderful way of many, many perspectives. One house, one unit, one long house, or as Martin Luther King called it, the world house, of which we all have rooms. Is that a fair enough answer for the moment? Okay, thank you.
Maybe a couple more. There's one more on Zoom, I believe.
Okay, and there's a young man over there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so this one is from Eric, and he asks, if sentences were typically much shorter, let's say a year or two max, would the institutional memory that seems so important to the success of the program be sustainable? He says, simply think how quickly student groups can fade because there are no successor leaders. And as a follow-up to that, he asks, what is the minimum size of the cohort that is necessary for the critical mass of success?
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you what sizes we've had. The transcommunal classes in Soledad are about 30 men. And Samanawak teaches about 4 of those a year. The combined UCSC CTF class is about 10, 15 UCSC students and about 30 CTF students. That seems to work well. Beyond that, it would start to get kind of unwieldy. But by continuing to do it, it reaches more and more. I estimate that over the past 18 years, these classes, including certainly the bulk of them being taught by the Samanawak group, the Peace Warriors, have probably reached about 1,500 men, roughly. Again, we're not keeping tabs in a direct kind of way, but given the number of people in the classes and the fact that they've been taught year after year for 18 years, it probably comes out to about that. The man who opened up that documentary, Ramon Mora, who, by the way, one day in a session we had, did a beautiful rap version of Transcommunality that was brilliant. I mean, he had every element in there, but he did it. He's serving 3 life sentences. So I am not quite sure what you mean by 1 to 2 year sentences. No one in there has 1 to 2 year sentences. They've all been there a long time. They're sentenced to a long time. But as I say, the success rate of getting out and also getting discharged from parole, not just getting parole, but getting discharged from parole, which means you're a free person in a more open sense of the term, continues to grow. So, and the institutional memory in Soledad is very strong, very strong. Universities are a little bit harder because we have, every year 25% of the population disappears and 25% of it's new, right, roughly. So there's always that issue of like, institutional memory culture inside of a higher learning institution. But in Soledad, it's very strong. It's very strong. So I'm not worried about this. I mean, if we all got evaporated by aliens from outer space, Soledad would still be able to do this.
Hey, I was curious, there's the, what is it, the William James Association that's based here in Santa Cruz.
Right.
And I think, was Eloise Pickard-Smith started, maybe helped start it back in the 60s or 70s, and I was curious if you have collaborative work with them or what your relationship is.
Yeah, we overlap. In fact, I was on their board for a while, a few years ago. No, we overlap with them. And, again, there's a lot. That's the other amazing thing. There's a lot of wonderful, positive organizations doing wonderful, positive work. And it is possible. I think probably we could do a better job of coordinating. That's probably true. But we do overlap. And like I said, I was on their board for a while, and it was a great experience. They do a wonderful program of art and culture that is just astonishing. So thank you for that.
Maybe one more question.
Yeah. How about this young lady here?
I just want to say your work is really transformational, and we need so much more of it. I wondered about the part, because I'm a psychologist, and the mental health of the people you're working with. I would imagine you might begin to see maybe a very slight change or difference, and I wonder if that's been looked at all, and just their sense of self, from being treated like a person for a change.
Yeah.
And just that I just think it's so powerful. It has so many other dynamics in which it could be helpful. But I wondered if we could even transpose it. It's so needed there more than almost any place else. But I'm thinking about, because of how horrendous our country is now and how divided, into our schools. Yeah. If there's a way we could, years ago I worked in cooperative learning, trying to help kids in schools learn from each other. But we have to do something. We're killing each other without being in prison. Right. And we need to talk to maybe taking kids from a Christian school to visit kids from a Jewish school and talk to each other and see there's some commonalities and they don't have the hates that may be imposed on them. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to do something really unusual and extreme because these are pretty extreme times. And I just think your work lends itself to so many important places where we can
Well, thank you.
do
Thank
some
you.
healing and move forward.
Thank you. I agree with you. I think it does. Not my work personally exactly, but the work of all these men. That's what you just said a couple of minutes ago. One of the things we hear over and over again from the brothers inside is, it's good to be treated like a human being again. So that's a common refrain. But, you know, I feel that way too. I mean, they treat me with respect. They have no side issues about anything about my appearance or anything. University professor, it doesn't matter. You know, it's John, Amos, we work together. So I think I've been told, I should say, some real personal transformation. Like the brother who thought of himself as having been Tadadaho with the snakes in his hair, to Tadadaho, the peace warrior, who literally signs the peace warrior manifesto of nonviolence and community construction. It does happen. We don't go in and ask people what they did, what they think, and we're not prying. But as we develop these interpersonal relationships through these actions, and we work together with mutual respect, we talk to each other, you know, in all sorts of ways. So we share a lot. So I do hear stories of transformation. But again, we're not, you know, it's not a research project. I'm not tracking it. It's not, but it's happening, at least with some men, and probably quite a few. Okay, thank you.
John, thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay.